Hi everybody, it's Kristina Dennis, the Transformational Self-Empowerment Master. I'm going to change these lights just a little bit. I see my shadow. No, I guess this is just the way it's going to work. I am coming back into you to discuss a little more about the brain and the power of the brain to change the plasticity, the neuroplasticity. I first learned about when I said, my son's autism diagnosis came and I had to run out and get a master's degree in nervous systems and all kinds of stuff because there just wasn't any answers. And so we had to keep looking as parents and keep looking, and there's still an entire community out there that's doing that. And I want to encourage everybody who is scared that they actually see that there's options for your brain and for its plasticity. And yesterday I talked about the negative bias and how our brain is trained, ourselves are trained to see the negative, the one negative thing that you may see versus 1,000 positives. When you're looking at the negative, and we always want to judge ourselves for our thoughts or our processes without understanding that they are number one. When you're looking at a negative thought, I challenged you yesterday to go ahead and try to take a step back before you judge yourself for having that negative thought or that moment, and realize that that is your brain and your mind's way of keeping you safe. And that there's an entire process that is instantaneous and all people have it. And all the amount of self-help or think positive stunts that you have is really, really not that interesting in regards to, what the truth is, which is if you have a negative feeling or you have a judgment or a moment where something shows up, to let yourself have that. And I asked you to please take a moment and think about that before you do it. So hopefully some of you were able to do that. I saw several people watch the video, and I certainly was able to kind of look back, and I was happy to have the reminder. But today I want to talk about the power that you have in regards to what you think about and what you feel. And the truth of the matter is there's your brain and there's your mind. And a lot of people are like, well, what is the difference? So obviously the brain is the matter, the actual mass. It's the circuitry, it's the wiring, it's where everything gets pushed through. And our mind is what our nervous system is representing information through. And I thought this was super interesting to understand that your mind is part of your nervous system and that they work very much together. And the way that it was explained to me was if you're walking through some crosswalks or streets and you are looking at street lights, red, green, yellow, you understand that those are physical matters, right? That there is a light, it's red, it's green, and you understand that there's actual mass out there. But what that red light or that green light or that walk sign is showing you, that representation of information, is your mind. And so when we have things that are going on in our mind or things that are showing up in our mind, how do we make that work in our favor? And how do we go in and fill up our tanks so that when negative bias shows up, we are prepared to have other experiences to call upon? And so I loved knowing that, understanding that if you get that information and if you start using some of these self-helps or mantras or things that, we have talked about, the mantras sound tool, if you start using it to make things happen in your life, is in regards to where you allow your brain to go, allow your mind to go, you can use it for the positive. And that's what's so cool about knowing that the brain is plastic and that it can change. So if you are a person who has a nervous system like myself, it's a little scattered sometimes, a little sensitive, it's definitely survived some trauma, it has some things that are built in, you might be in a position where you want to start changing some of the things, like I did with my son. I wanted to change some of his nervous systems. I wanted to help some of the messages, the information that was being represented to his brain, to become clearer and less aggressive. And so when I started doing this research and looking at what people were saying and what was happening, I was thinking about the fact that if you were in a position to change some of the stuff that was happening to you, could you on your own? And I think that's really hard. And that's why we talk about, and I talk a lot about, getting a group of people around you and making sure that you are sharing this information without judgment to people and doing it in a safe manner. Transformational self-empowerment is all about using all the tools that are available to you. And you will hear me say over and over again, change your thinking, move your body, change your thinking, and your life will change, and how you feel will change, and the feelings will catch up. And also on the contrary statement, saying you have to feel every feeling, you have to observe it. And so where does this all come from? If you look at how to change your brain, you understand that underlying neural processes are the way to go. And what that means is that if you have a situation in your life that is a positive situation, can you sit long enough with that positive situation to really let it come in? And this is a big question that I want to talk a little bit more about today, and then I'll go more into the brain science, because I feel like my first 5 minutes were a little loopy. Tomorrow, when I'm a little clearer. So Brene Brown says it. I read it in a book by Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, that the biggest courage, the thing that takes the most courage, although vulnerability is what we all learned from Brene Brown, but she was talking about the fact that, okay, shame will take you out, but joy will take you out faster. And when I was reading The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks talked about the fact that he had come back to his office from a really great meeting and had a really great lunch, was sitting back, putting his feet on his desk, really in a power pose. And all of a sudden a thought occurred to him that his daughter, who was away at summer camp, was not okay. And he couldn't let go of this thought. And he ended up calling the summer camp, and the counselor said, "Oh, I'm looking at her. She's playing with somebody. She's doing just fine." And he noted that she didn't seem so surprised that she got this frantic call from a parent. And he said, "You're not surprised?" She said, "No, parents do this all the time." And he said, "Oh, okay. Well, what do you think that is?" She says, "Well, a lot of parents think that if they have a thought that something is going on with their child, then that must mean that something is going on with their child. They don't understand that it was just a thought. So they have to jar themselves." And he was explaining this as a leaping point for his work about how many of us are programmed to be happy, and how many of us have the capacity to stay happy or be content. And I'm not talking about trauma. I'm not talking about grief work. I believe there's a huge place for that grief work. But what I am talking about is that capacity to take in something that is joyful. And this needs to be challenged before you even start thinking about how you can reprogram your brain, because it's true. I knew instantly an example in my own life where anytime I got really happy about something or very excited about it, I would think of something that was awful. And it was almost my way of governing myself, and absolutely was my way of making sure that I didn't get too excited, or I became less vigilant about things that would happen that were going to, do me in. And what I would use, it was incredibly, and it is still incredible material. When I was first getting together with my partner, I had so much oxytocin, so much love flowing through, and I still do. That's, obviously that first year and a half where you have all those feelings. And I was with a partner for the first time that was truly there for me, and truly, steady and kind. And I would get so happy when we got to spend time together. And then I would immediately bring in the future of my son. And I would get overwhelmed with this panic. And I thought about that immediately. I thought, oh my gosh, I've been doing that my whole life. I've been doing that for at least 15 years since Billy was born. It was almost like, don't get too happy, because the last time you were really happy, you got a diagnosis that you weren't expecting. Wow. Boy, did I start doing some work. And I read through his book, and I highly recommend it. It's called The Biggest Leap. And it talks about upper limiting beliefs. And I realized that for a long time, I had, maybe my entire life, this philosophy, this unwritten rule that things that were good won't last, that it's impossible to be happy most of the time. And it's just not a safe world if you live like that. And I'm not talking about Pollyanna, we don't have our grief and we don't have our pain. I'm talking about the ability to be happy and content, especially when things are going well. And why do I have to bring in these negative belief systems? And then I have had that confirmed with, listening to talks about shame and about vulnerability and the fact that the capacity for joy is so much scarier than we recognize. And so I'd like you to take a little bit of time and think about certain moments in your own life where things are going wonderfully. And what popped up? What was your governing moment? What helped you get back down onto ground? Get back into, your panic or, watch out, that mode. And I think that you're going to find out that is probably happening in your life. And even though you don't wake up or go to a therapist or go to a support group and say, I really make sure I'm not happy. I make sure that I keep myself on, my little, upper limiting belief system keeps me safe in my own mind, and how you can challenge that. So think about it for the next 24 hours or 48 hours or however long it takes until we get the next video up about do you have the capacity? What would you look like? What would life look like if you could enjoy a full day, 24 hours, without thinking about something that could happen? When you first have your babies, those of us who have babies, or and you think about you're standing over this crib. This is Brene Brown's story, but it's so true. I remember this. And you have this love, this capacity for love that you've never experienced, and it is too much. And you have to think immediately about a danger. It's just this self-protective thing that we do. And how can we challenge that? How can we change the information that's being presented through our nervous system, through our mind? How do we change that so that we can change our brains, which will eventually change our minds? And so I want you to think about that. I know this was a bunch of words coming at you, but please take the time to think about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how exciting the brain is and how you can change your own mind, and then change your brain and then change your own mind again, and how you can grow and have that upper limiting belief system be forever in your rearview mirror. All right. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.